to talk.
Okay, and we cannot talk at the same time. So now you shut up, okay? Please. Then I will do. Okay, well, hello. This presentation was made by Anne, Veronique, Claude, and myself. Anne from Zurich and me will do the talk. So if you look at time right now, you may consider that we are more in after-time work than in a decent, proper time to conference talk. So we'll start our presentation softly with a snack. Please click on. There is a little delay, but it will work. We don't see the presentation change, the slide change. Ah, okay, so this is the snack. So I don't know if you know, but most of the people try to open the banana by the top. But if you do so, you hurt the banana, you waste a little bit of the product, and you get your hand dirty. But if you focus on the bottom of the banana, please click on, you will see that with a little pressure, you will open it softly and properly. So this is just a picture. Please click on to underline something that contrasts our presentation regarding to the other presentation of the day. We will talk about bottom-up approach. This is the aim of our presentation. The second picture that we will present, please click on, is that even for top-down solutions or bottom-up solution, today in sustainability issues, we have a lot of controversies, and you have changed the display. No? Okay, well, it's fine. There is a lot of controversies and distance among the stakeholders of the issue that make difficult even top-down or bottom-up solutions. So I think that after the COVID pandemics, we are all aware about this, and the presentation that have been done today underline also these controversies and difference among and distance among the stakeholders around the environmental issues. Please click on. Now let's talk about these controversies. In Europe and in the East, we have the allegory of the cave. We consider that a man understands his impact, the impact of his living and his impact on the world through his shadow. But in the East, yes, they have another metaphor paradigm, which is the blind monks and the elephant. I will not explain it now because it will take time, but you can look at internet to understand this. This second paradigm underlines something that is interesting to work on the controversies and to cut the distance between stakeholders. It underlines that we need to work on sharing visions and understanding to change the world. If we remain at an individualist approach, we will be fatalist. We cannot change. But if we share our vision and our understanding, we may find smart solutions and change our point of view. And this is the aim of our presentation, and the pesticides is a relevant questions to work with through those kind of approach. Why? Because there is multiple actors in the last presentation of Yap underline it. There is multiple actors with different behaviors, sometimes the conflicting interest, something that can be considered as a curse for someone can be a blessing for others, and every action of one actor can engender uncertainties and feedback loop or impact on other actors. So since we are in a wicked problem like this, like pesticide, how can we work to make people working together to foster the public policy making and to support the public policies? Click on, please. So to tackle these problems, we will present the serious game approach, which is the aim of the presentation that we will do today. And the plan of the presentation will be according this. There's 3 points. So Anne will display to you and explain what is serious game, then how serious game is used and can contribute to public policy making or to support public policy. Then we will back to Paris, and I will explain, I will display a quick overview and some research that is ongoing research in the FAST project. So now I will put you in handback. I will fly to Zurich where Anne.
Thanks, Murad. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me? Exactly. So who plays game on a regular basis in the room? And by playing game, I mean at least with another person, not on your mobile phone, and with some kind of game board. If you can raise your hand, or if you can vote for those people who are online. And I can't see on my little screen, but we're what, about 10, 20%? Yeah, about that. Well, I asked the same question to our students last week, master students, and here we have 70% of them still playing. So when and why do we stop? Where is the average age where we drop from 70 to 20? I don't have the answer, and that's not the topic of this presentation, but let's keep this image in mind. I'll come back to it later. Because as a matter of fact, why I started with this question is because play is an important element of culture. We are a playful species. And if you observe kids, they only learn through games and role plays with different level of complexity. And we can even extend to the mammals at large. They also do play as a simulation and rehearsal and training exercise. And here you have a cat play fat, and it's a training for the day they will meet the dog of the neighbor, maybe. So games are definitely associated to childhood, to fun, to entertainment. So where is this idea of serious games coming from? Well, actually, it traces back in the 70s when Clark Apt had the idea to put together 2 terms that are apparently opposing or contradictory, seriousness and play. And he was the first one to coin serious games as games used for purposes beyond entertainment. That is to instruct, to inform, to train, to teach, and also for planning and problem solving in government and industry. And we have to remember, nowadays, there's a bit of a misunderstanding or confusion when we talk about serious games. People always associated with digitalized and computerized game. We have to remember that back then, the computer were absolutely not the way they are right now. And Apt was referring to card games and board games. And the other also that was really implementing in pushing the serious game into the world of business and management was Richard Dukes. He paved the way for the use of such games in businesses. Here I do a little aparté for you to remember that actually such games were used way before they were called serious game in the military and defense field. The most famous one is this Kriegspiel on the left side that was developed by the Prussian army to teach battlefield tactics to officers. And this game was actually adopted as a serious tool for trainings. Later on, the US Army picked on such methodology, and Rand Corporation developed lots of serious game, and not just game theory, I'm talking here. And nowadays, I've just discovered recently, they also have a center for gaming as part of RAND. So the use of serious game beyond just pure entertainment is well developed, well institutional tools in specific domains, such as military, health as well, and business. But pesticides is not yet a domain for the defense, and it's more linked to environmental issues. So what about serious game and the so-called socio-ecological system? Well, in this field, in this domain, we can probably say as French people, we are proud that the French were quite pioneered here. And back in the early 90s, there was a consortium of researchers starting from CIRAD, but later on being joined by research from INRAE and IRD. And they developed the so-called companion modeling approach. And basically, there were a bunch of researchers interested in what's happening really at the intersection between social dynamics and, here if you see my pointer, between social dynamics and ecological dynamics, what's happening there. And they came up with an approach, a posture, and a set of tools with 2 main objectives. Companion modeling being a participatory modeling approach to, one, improve knowledge and better understanding of the complex socio-ecological system. And the second one is to support collective decision-making. So in practice, what it works and what it's all about, it's definitely an iterative process. You have lots and lots of back and forth between the lab and the field, co-problem definition, redefinition of the problem as the process evolves. And basically, the whole idea behind is that we all have our own mental models of the world. They are segmented, they are partial, sometimes they are flawed, but still we take decisions on a daily basis based on our understanding of the world. And basically, behind the idea is they wanted to create some kind of stakeholder arena by involving people in co-designing, co-sharing their understanding of the world, coming up with a model as a shared and a simplified representation of the world, and in doing so, hoping to modify individual model and the way we make decisions. So the idea is really to enlarge, enlighten, or modify those mental models. Okay, COMOD there's a lot of tool in the toolbox, but people tend to reduce it to the most striking or emblematic part, which are the role-playing games and the agent-based models. Here you see a few examples starting from Madagascar on the left, to Colombia in the middle, to Zimbabwe, where they are using an agent-based model projected on the table. Okay. So nowadays, there's actually a large community of researchers using such games in the field of environmental science. And the games they are developing are multiple, diverse. So in trying to extract the core common elements, what I call the DNA, what we are using at role-playing games. When people join a session, we tell them to embody a role, their own role or the role of their opponent, but they play a role. The game is, as I said, co-constructed model. We don't do model for the sake of modeling. We co-construct the model to support dialogue. We have players in the room, multiple players, and a facilitator. That's key. And also, it's always a combination of briefing, game, and debriefing. We give the starting rules and the constraints, but what we want is that our games are open for new rules, new roles, or new scenarios, the counterfactual that Julie talked about this morning, for example. We take a step aside from realistic representation. I'll come back to the idea in a second on realism. And also, there's no winning strategies in our game. We don't script strategies. We don't tell the players, as a farmer, you need to maximize profit in your game. Because in doing so, we lock the system in one direction. And that's the contrary of what we want to do. Maybe to reposition our games with other approaches that have been mentioned earlier on and that will be mentioned tomorrow. I don't know if you know this paper on games as tools to address conservation conflicts. Basically, they did a review of game used in theoretical approaches like game theory, experimental approaches like choice experiment, and what they call constructivist approaches like the companion modeling games. We're definitely here to highlight management solution and engage scenario. And maybe one thing, the idea is not to rank these three approaches. They all have their strengths and limitation. There's no magical one for a recipe, else we wouldn't probably be here today. But just to show that maybe one level of difference is the level of power and freedom that we give to participants in our game. But it comes at a cost and at a price. And we'll discuss that later. Okay, so let's move to the second part, or how such games work in practice and how they can be used for public policy design and support. One thing to remember, our games do not predict future events. They are not meant for that. What they are meant for is to share and confront perceptions, grasp complexity of the system and disentangle complexity, highlight forces and drivers that move the system in one direction or the other. You can connect the short-term and long-term impact, and you can also connect local and global scales. You can also explore alternative futures in a low-risk environment. And Paul talked earlier about first, do no harm. In our games, actually, you can cut all the trees, or you can use pesticides full on. If you're not satisfied, we start again. We replace the board as it was at the beginning, and we try again. And you can negotiate new forms of collective action. So it's really about understanding the variable, the causes, and the effect that are impacting our decision, and in hoping to do today make better informed decision, basically. Enough talking. If you've never been part of such an experiment, let me quickly take you through one in less than 1 minute. Normally they last around 3 hours. So here what you can see at the moment is just green hexagon, different level of green. You see wooden tokens, you see pawns, but you probably have no clue what this game is about, and because it's too abstract, until I tell you that it's actually, and I hope the video will start, yes, it's a landscape, an allegory of a landscape, actually. And what you are seeing is the allegory of the tropical forest of the Congo Basin. People around this table are embodying roles of CEOs of logging and mining companies. They interact with the markets, the government, NGOs, and they design their strategies and shape the environmental, economic, and social landscape based on their individual and collective decision. And here they played 5 rounds, which represent 50 years in time, and players experience all the major drivers of land use change in the tropic. So I've shown you already a few pics of what our games look like. I've claimed they can be useful for policy design. And usually at this stage, if you've never been part of such experiment, you start frowning your head and asking yourself, but seriously, how such a game can be useful, considering they are so unrealistic looking. And by the way, through this presentation, since we are the last one, I will already integrate the frequently asked questions, so you can rush to the apéro straight after. So the first question that we always have here, how realistic are your games? Well, realism seems a desirable attribute for any model designed to help decision making. And the question is really not new. Maybe you're familiar with the seminal work by Levins in the 60s, 66, where it said basically, you can't have it all. You can't have realism, generosity, and precision at the same time. Well, here by realism, we need to clarify what we mean. If we mean that the outputs of the model accurately describe real-life outcomes, yeah, definitely our game sessions are not realistic. The landscape that you saw before with the green and yellow patches is not describing per se the amount of forest and the state they are left in the Congo Basin. But if we consider that realism is also about that the fact that the model describes with accuracy the causal links between system components, then maybe, yes, we can say our game are realist. And we are definitely around this line with our approach. But as I said, we want this necessary and voluntary step aside from reality. And why is that? It's because one of the major difficulties when dealing with wicked problem is probably not so much understanding the biophysical processes, but rather the values held by the stakeholders, the segmented perception of the system, their agenda, so quite often hidden, and also the power and knowledge asymmetries. And precisely because a game session involves people, 2 major components of decision-making are constitutive to the model: the fact that we are facing bounded rationality, we are not homo economicus rational, and behavioral plasticity. We respond and learn and cope when receiving feedback. And in game session, you have direct feedbacks. You see the consequences of your interaction with the system and with others. So the notion of realism always triggers the next frequently asked question, which is realism of game behavior. Sophie this morning in a presentation, she had, do students behave like farmers? In our case, is do farmers behave like farmers? So how do we ensure people behave in the game like in reality? Well, maybe Oscar Wilde would have answered, man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth. Replace mask by role and you have our answer. So how much trust can we place on the observation during the game session? The short and provocative answer would be none. The long answer would be we place equal trust as in responses to formal surveys and questionnaires with all the cognitive bias that are associated to it. And the former presentation talked a lot about that. So for us, really, the question is what happens if people play this way in the game? When I say we don't care, it's not true. We care about this relationship, this distance, this delta between relation with the reality and the game. And for that, as I said, we need debriefing. And that's where serious is critical. We need serious debriefing to explore this relationship. It's an essential step for people to reflect on the experience they just had in the game. But ultimately, does it really matter if players act in the game in ways they would never do in the field? Well, this is precisely what we seek to achieve after all. It's innovation, thinking outside the box, creativity, and the exploration of possible futures beyond one can think can happen. Okay, after the question of realism of the model, realism of the game behavior, the next one in line that you're probably asking yourself is, well, okay, fair enough, that's fun, your little tools, but you will never get ministers playing your game. Ministers or powerful people or important people. Well, actually, that's not true. We managed to have people playing the game, but it's true that unlike in military games or business games where it's really part of their daily activity, in environmental problem where games are still facing this kind of prejudice. Many people associate games with leisure, like our master students still playing, rather than serious activities. And of course, when you join such experiment, you face reputational risk, you face difficulties to justify to your superiors, to your donors, to the taxpayers, how you will allocate time and resources. You have many other cultural barriers. And that's why sometimes using serious games is easy. And sometimes we don't even mention serious game. We have all kinds of crazy name of strategical dialogue, blah, blah, blah. I would prefer to call a cat and say it's an experiment using game. Anyway, to come back to the question of minister, well, that's not true. We managed to have important people. Here you see the same game I presented you. You have representatives from the private sector and from NGO playing this game and devising new strategies for FSC. And on the right-hand side, you have former minister from the finance in Cameroon. I will come to this game in a second. So after all this question, the question of change, what do we really learn from such experiment and what does it change? And really tangible change of the approach is very difficult to demonstrate, but we are confronted to the same problem that all research institutions doing research for development face when exhorted to demonstrate impact, because changes in our world nowadays have multiple, complex, and often cryptic causes. So that's where monitoring and evaluation is critical, and it's a core element of the companion modeling approach to claim attribution to new contract, new policy, new infrastructure, or new practices. And now, finally, let me tell you two stories from the field. I could have picked many to discuss this notion of changes. So let's fly to Bhutan, where over 3 years, an international team of French and Bhutanese researcher develop an approach, a companion modeling approach, to tackle long-lasting conflicts between upstream and downstream rice farmers facing the problem of a limited resource to share, in this case, water. And basically, they went through the full process. They co-created a game. And ultimately, they saw institutional innovation and social innovation. There was the creation over 7 watershed management of a resource management committee, and even you see the person on the right picture signing a paper. They adopted a common action plan. So in this case, you can really relate this action to the approach. But one might say, okay, maybe it works at the very local level. It's very hard to upscale such approach. Yeah, true, upscaling is hard. But as a matter of fact, if we come back to my, there's a delay here, exactly. If we come back to my Ministry of Finance that I showed you before, here you see a game we developed in Cameroon about the palm oil supply chain. You've heard all about palm oil. You might have had some for breakfast. It's a very polarizing topic like pesticides. And basically, we developed a game with smallholders, with the agro-industry, and with the representative from the government to understand and put the fingers on all the bottlenecks and issues, inefficiencies in the supply chain. Why Cameroon is no longer self-sufficient, why they rely on import, why there is waste throughout the supply chain, why there is mistrust between the producer, the smallholders, and the agro-industry. And by to the French Ministry of Research at the IUCN last month. And basically what we managed to see is the formation, farmer playing the game discover the role and the power of cooperatives. It helps to join forces. It doesn't work all the time, and the game allows to show all the failures of cooperative as well, but it helps. And we've seen in the field the new cooperatives being formed, and WWF and the ministry are using the tool to promote the formation of cooperatives. We've also witnessed new prices and payment mechanisms between the actors in the supply chain, and new contracts between the smallholders and the agro-industry. So now I give you back the floor for the last part to see how such approach could be used for the FAST project.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much. The time is over, but I will just go. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, I just try to go quick, just to display to you an overview of our ongoing research in the FAST project. Can we see the slide? Thank you. So we want to use such approach in the case of pesticides in France. And this will be done in the FAST project that is founded by the PPR. And our aim is to contribute to the public policy toolbox via a serious game. Our outcomes, our expected outcomes is to produce a tool to support dialogue and making converging the stakeholders on this issue. In terms of sharing diagnose, to making a more shared diagnose, also to identify pathways to excite. And our second aim is by aggregating learning from game session to produce innovative alternative policy or a new organization or strategy that are required to support usual policy instrument. Next slide, please. So how we will do this, as the plan explained by Anne, it's the same. So we will co-construct a consensual model on how it works, how an agricultural landscape works, with the supply chain, the individual, the social pressure, etc., and the biophysical dynamics, indeed the disease. And then we translate this into a model that takes the form of a game that represents a virtual landscape area, a landscape agricultural area. Then we will do many game sessions to gain learnings. Next slide, please. So such pros have challenges, as Anne underlined some of them. The key role, for example, the key role of the manager of the participative interaction is a very important issue that is underlined in many publications. In our case, we have Véronique Soucher, which is online, and which is long and widely experienced in such interaction. Next, please. Click. The second challenge you confronted when you do such approach is that it's very, very important to question the involvement and the relevance of the actors' representatives enrolled in the game design and in the game play. So in our case, we choose to take a real agricultural area as a pilot model for the game co-construction. This region is the region Les Hauts-de-France, which is the French region with the less organic farming, and which is confronted to many phytosanitary impasses. In this region, we have strong partnership with the local community of actors, and we are very in strong cooperation with all the cooperative and input distributor in the region, the extension service and the R&D organization, and the local representative of the agricultural ministry. Next, please, click. Thank you. The last challenge that we will be confronted to is that such approach require very, very long timeline. And in our case, we have started the interaction, the transdisciplinary interaction before the project start. And thanks to the PPR features, we will have much time because it is a 6-year project, and this will enable us to do something very interesting with the serious game. And finally, this game will be produced as Creative Commons. So the cooperative with whom we work and other cooperatives for other regions contacted us that they were interested in using such games, and also scholars want to use it in training in, for example, engineer schools. This is an important point that may be interest many of researchers, because in such game we can use it to implement many different policies or instruments that we are from social sciences. And this is an overview of the game as discussed with the stakeholders, and as it may change a little, but this is what we agree with the stakeholders. It will be a virtual agriculture area with different kind of production, with 5 farmers played by real actors, 2 cooperatives played with real actors, an agro-industrial firm, which is a local firm that provide contracts for specific productions, will be played by an external actor, which we can be a researcher. And we have finally a government regulator that is a scripted role. And here we can test many things. We can test taxes, like you say, Alain. We can test rules, new rules, like Ines and Benoit do, or some incentive that other colleagues, that this is, we need to discuss, and maybe we can feed it. And if you don't want to work with us, no problem. We will transfer you. It's a Creative Commons. So, in conclusion, with such approach, we hope that more people will be aware of the pesticide exit needs, and on the pathway to this pesticide exit. And in this, we hope also that everyone can contribute to policy making or to support policy that are in use. So by creating a new organization, new contract, new techniques, etc. Finally, serious game is suitable for policy design, as we show. It produces sometimes alternative policies, and sometimes new organizational innovation or new strategies that support usual policy instruments. And in this sense, this approach is complementary to other social science involved in policy making. And thank you very much.
Okay, we have questions online, but
I have a question. Your suggestion, the type of game, I mean, no, the topic, the game you are going to produce in FAST is more or less focused on improving coordination among actors and so on, in order to do what? To change the varieties, the crops, things like that. Do you think it would be possible to build a serious game, to co-design or at least to test public policy? I'm thinking about Alain's speech. I would be very interesting to have people around the table trying to design this tax and compensation system in details, because I'm seeing that in details. Do you think it would be possible?
In our game, as expected, we will have different varieties. Resistant varieties, sensible varieties. So it will feed the logic of use of genetic resistance. We will use also pesticide and biopesticide. So we can test something that, okay, now there is new rules, there is a tax. The one who use sensible or biopesticide are tax-free, and the other have to major tax.
I think it's very much agronomic oriented. You are testing new agroecological or agronomic solution, whereas we can imagine games to test policy options, to try to define what is the best policy combination.
But as Anne underlined it, this is what I said now is the input of the game. Then we will see how the players react, how they discuss, then we debrief with them. And here is the major learning. What was the impact of this tax? What was good? What is need to change? How can we do in other ways? And this debriefing is the real substance of the learning, I guess. Anne, you may complete if you.
Yeah, No, I was about to say that all these taxes or policy mechanisms can be seen as scenarios in our game. And if they don't emerge from players, we say at round 3, oh, now this is new taxes, it will work like that. Let's try it. Let's see how it impacts on the system.
It's too late, and I think that now I understand your question. The scenario of the the taxes or the policies that we will be scripted is not done yet. We discussed with players. They said, okay, let's discuss now about the biophysical and the organizational features. But I think that we need, and we are open to discuss with researcher or practitioner, lawyers, to construct the scripts. We have in our interaction and co-construction the draft, but I think that we can get interaction with other people from the ministry and other researchers.
Okay, there is some question online. So there is a question, maybe Anne, you can answer directly to Eduardo about the use of ABM software like CoreMass. I don't know if everyone is interested like this, but Eduardo has another question about the evidence of strengthening agri-environmental governance through companion modeling approach. What kind of evidence do you have?
So I can answer also the other one on generalization of model. Agri-environmental governance, this is the first time I'm personally involved in such topic. I would have to consult. I can't answer honestly here and tell you in this experiment they changed this or that. I would have to look into the Commode website.
Question from the online people. It is from Yves Coquet. What will be the main objectives of the SOCIAUX game? Reaching a no pesticide territory or finding ways to reduce pesticide use? The main objective, is it to reach a no pesticide territory? Is it to find an agreement among researchers, I guess, to have a no pesticide territory? Or is it to find ways? I don't know what he means by ways. Is it policies or is it
our is to support a paradigm shift. This is the first step. I think that if people try to reflect on the landscape, not on just their individual and their farm, if they look to a long-term actions and reactions, something like this, really it's a change of mindset that we want. Then, if this paradigm shift is reached, I think we will find a lot of solutions. So we don't, the game will be appropriated by the actors and they will find a way if they appropriate it well. And if it is well designed, I think they will find ways. And in our case, in the Hauts-de-France, they are open. They say, okay, maybe under some constraint, we have to discuss together, but maybe we can develop organic farming. So something like, there will be an impact, a local impact. But our target for us is to get a tools for paradigm shift. Thank you.
Okay. Christian?
Thank you very much for Anne and Mourad for this presentation. I look forward to play with you. I have two questions. The first one is how you take on board, especially in the example of in Hauts-de-France, the downstream sector. So what are the degrees of freedom in the production you want to get access to? There are plenty of processing industry up there. So are you going to carry on producing exactly what they expect, or they are ready to move away? So this was the first thing. And the second is, I do not see how you take on board the uncertainty, because this is what is really tricky, is I do something correct and I don't know whether it's going to be okay. So that's why pesticide is so nice. So how do you take on board this uncertainty? Are you going to tackle the insurance system? And also, how do you, in the serious game more generally, include the complexity? this was also something that Alain pointed out, is how to avoid an usine à gaz. And it's a new English word. And, and raised by Alain, so you will have to pay taxes to him. And anyway, property rights. But in fact, a serious game, you tend to make things that are simple. And the problem we have is that we try to move from a system that is simple to a system that is awfully complex. And how you can, during a serious game, tackle seriously this question?
The first about the downstream, we have discussed with actors, local actors downstream. We find that in the rational there are two kinds of production. The production that is not with local industrial and with a certain standard that goes everywhere in the world. And the local industry, there's Bonduelle, there is McCain. So we will do a firm that will be maybe Chips & Co. or something like this, and that will be use the same tools that the actual industrial will use. And we want to invite this industrial to get and to enrich in second time this lover. Maybe they can find other contract or something like this. But for the now, because there is some issue power between farmers, cooperatives, and this industrial, we choose to let it, okay, now we have to talk about agronomy and epidemiology, so we will go back to you when we discuss contract, and we will do this. So this is very important to get, because our aim is, as Alain said, to connect the downstream and the upstream. Okay. The second things about uncertainties. Anne, maybe you want to respond, but just a few words to let you, before shifting to you. There are some spatial effects about using resistance gene, about using pesticide and biopesticide. If everyone uses the same solutions, there is a loss. And in the same time, some solution, it's what is agronomic or choice of the product, there is the reverse. In the case, if many people choose these solutions, okay, so what we want is that people reflect at the big picture, not just at their farm. And this is, we guess, something that will reduce the uncertainties, not putting it at zero, but collectively we can reduce it. So maybe Anne, you want to complete on the uncertainties?
And again, I talked about the individual decision that people take in the game, but through the scenarios, quite often we implement scenarios like climate change. Players have to experience a drought or a flood, or in our case, resistance dropping, for example. And this kind of uncertainty we can introduce in the game. Now, the thing we don't know, we can't. There's a thing we know will happen, we don't know how they will happen, we can play with that. The thing we don't know, no, impossible. And as Eduardo mentioned in the game, in the chat, when the game mechanism, especially the biophysical components, are becoming too complex, that's where we blend role-playing game with agent-based model to have in the background all these modeling parts. Now, to answer the simplicity, the topic of palm oil in Cameroon or the water management in Bhutan were not simple problems, and they were as complex as the pesticides. And the game we developed were not simple at all. The difficulty for us is to strike the balance between kids and keep it simple and stupid, and keep it difficult and stupid, kids and kids games model, sorry. Strike the balance to find the core element that will be enough to foster this dialogue. And we don't have the recipe. It's a trial and error all the time. That's why our models are co-constructed.
Thank you. May I complete? I think that our best guarantee to avoid usine à gaz is the multi-stakeholders. Because when researchers say, okay, it will be fine to do this, other stakeholders say, keep calm, keep calm. And sometimes it's a cooperative, sometimes it's a farmer. But together, we avoid. We want to act. We want something usable and utile. Thank you. Sorry for the time.
thank you to all of us for the ones that are still online and the one in this room. So we'll be back tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's sorry for those that did not get an answer to their question.
Okay, we'll be back tomorrow at 9, exactly 9, because we have the speech of Robert Finger that is planned at 9. And there was some question in the chat or in the that didn't receive answers. So maybe Anne, you can read the question and answer directly, I think, in the chat, at least for this speech like this. Okay, have a good evening, have a good night, and see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you.